In 1837, a British explorer named Colonel Howard Vyse blasted his way into a sealed chamber above the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid. What he found inside stopped him cold. Red ochre graffiti, scrawled by workers 4,500 years ago, marking their work gang's territory. One phrase, painted casually where no tourist would ever see it, read the Friends of Khufu. These weren't messages meant for us. They were the ancient equivalent of construction workers signing their names on a beam before drywall covers it forever. And yet, somehow, people still believe aliens built the pyramids. For the next hour and a half, we're going to take a deep dive into one of humanity's most persistent mysteries. But here's the thing, this isn't going to be a frantic race through bullet points. We're going to take our time with this, really sit with the evidence, the theories, and the genuinely weird things that don't quite add up the way you'd expect. So if you're settling in for the night, maybe grab a cup of tea or get comfortable under a blanket. This is the kind of story that deserves time and attention. We'll walk through everything, from the mathematical precision that seems almost impossible, to the wild theories about hidden chambers and ancient technologies, to what archaeologists actually found when they dug up the workers' villages. We'll talk about why the alien theory became so popular in the first place, and honestly, we'll explore why part of us wants it to be true, even when the evidence points somewhere else entirely. Before we dive in, I'm genuinely curious. Comment 1 if you're watching from somewhere in the Americas, 2 if you're tuning in from Europe, Africa, or the Middle East, and 3 if you're joining us from Asia or Oceania. I love knowing where this story is reaching people. And if you enjoy this kind of unhurried, in-depth exploration, a quick like helps others who might be searching for exactly this kind of content find it too. Alright, let's begin at the beginning, with a structure so perfect that even modern engineers struggle to explain it. Now, speaking of different cultures solving similar problems, let's talk about what might be the most impressive part of the pyramid story. Not that it exists, but how it came to exist. Because when you actually sit down and do the math, building Great Pyramid starts to sound less like an ancient mystery and more like an engineering problem that borders on the absurd. Picture this, 2.3 million stone blocks, each one averaging about 2.5 tons. That's roughly the weight of a modern SUV. And some of these blocks, they weigh up to 80 tons. That's not a vehicle anymore. That's 16 elephants stacked together. And here's where it gets truly fascinating. Khufu ruled for about 23 years. If the pyramid was built during his reign, and the evidence suggests it was, then the workers would have needed to place a block every 2 to 3 minutes during daylight hours for 2 decades straight. When you first hear that, it sounds impossible. Your brain just rejects it. But here's the thing. When you've got 20,000 to 30,000 people working in coordinated teams, rotating shifts, with multiple ramps and work areas, suddenly, those numbers start to make sense. It's not magic. It's logistics on a scale we rarely attempt today. But that still leaves us with the big question. How did they actually get those blocks up there? For years, archaeologists assumed they used external ramps. Massive earthen structures spiraling around the pyramid. But there's a problem with that theory. To reach the top of a 146-meter pyramid with a ramp at a manageable slope, you'd need a ramp over 1 kilometer long. And you know what? There's no evidence of ramps that size. The amount of material needed would have exceeded the pyramid itself. In 1927, a French architect named Jean-Pierre Houdin proposed something brilliant. What if the ramp wasn't external? What if it was inside the pyramid? Imagine building a spiral tunnel as you go up, right inside the structure itself. You're using the pyramid to build the pyramid. Like building a house of cards the size of a building. It seems impossible until you realize you can build internal scaffolding as you go, then remove it when you're done. And here's what makes this more than just speculation. There's evidence. A notch at one corner. Density variations detected by microgravimetry that match exactly where an internal ramp would be. It's like finding the seams in a magic trick. But even with a ramp, internal or external, you've still got to move 80-ton granite beams up over 60 meters. Without cranes. Without pulleys as we know them. This is where ancient engineering gets really clever. They likely used counterweights, lever systems, possibly some form of ratchet mechanism that locked each section in place as they went. Think of it like climbing a ladder where each rung clicks into position behind you. You're not fighting gravity for the entire distance. You're conquering it one section at a time. And the precision inside? The king's chamber is so level, so perfectly aligned, that modern surveyors get a bit uncomfortable. How did they achieve that without laser levels? Without theodolites? The answer might be beautifully simple. Water. Picture a long, shallow trench carved into the bedrock. Fill it with water. Water always finds its own level. It's physics you can see. Now you've got a giant spirit level that spans the entire base. Mark where the water touches the sides. There's your reference plane. Simple tools. Clever application. Time and patience. Every single impossible engineering feat starts to dissolve when you add those ingredients together. The precision isn't impossible when you've got decades to get it right. The scale isn't impossible when you've got tens of thousands of hands. The complexity isn't impossible when you're building on generations of accumulated knowledge. We tend to think of the Great Pyramid as this singular achievement. But the Egyptians didn't just wake up one day and decide to build it. They'd been building pyramids for over a century by that point. Each one taught them something. Each failure, and yes, there were failures, pyramids that collapsed or bent, refined their techniques. The bent pyramid at Dashur. That's not a mystery. That's a mid-construction engineering correction. They realized the angle was too steep, that it would collapse under its own weight. So they changed it. Right there. Mid-build. That's not alien technology. That's humans learning in real time. And that might be the most remarkable thing about all of this. Great Pyramid represents the pinnacle of a learning curve. It's not an anomaly. It's the graduation ceremony of an entire civilization's engineering education. Every chamber, every shaft, every perfectly fitted block is a testament to something we sometimes forget. Humans are incredible problem solvers when we're given a clear goal, adequate resources, and enough time. The ancient Egyptians had all three. And they used them to build something that whispers across 4,500 years. We figured it out. With rope, and copper, and water, and patience, we figured it out. No. It's a humbling thought, isn't it? That the same species that builds quantum computers once moved mountains with nothing but ingenuity and determination. What modern engineering challenge do you think would baffle people 4,500 years from now? You know, we've spent all this time talking about how they built the pyramids, the tools, the workforce, the mathematical precision. But we've been making a fundamental mistake. We've been asking how they built them, when we should really be asking why. See, when we look at the Great Pyramid today, we see an impressive building, an architectural marvel, a testament to human engineering. But to the ancient Egyptians, they saw something completely different. They saw a machine for resurrection. Let me explain what I mean by that. Pharaoh wasn't just a king in the way we think of kings today. He wasn't simply a political leader or a wealthy ruler. He was literally considered a living god. Not metaphorically. Not symbolically. Literally. His death and rebirth weren't just important. They maintained Ma'at, cosmic order itself. The entire universe depended on it. Think about what that means. Building a pyramid wasn't an optional vanity project. It wasn't like a medieval king deciding to build a nice palace. It was existentially necessary for their civilization's survival. In their worldview, without that pyramid, without that transformation chamber for the pharaoh, the sun might not rise. The Nile might not flood. Chaos could consume everything. That's a fundamentally different motivation than anything we build today. And the details reflect this. The orientation to true north, south, east, and west, that wasn't the Egyptians showing off their surveying skills. It aligned the pharaoh with the cosmos, with the eternal journey of Ra, the sun god. Every morning, Ra was born. Every evening, he died. The pyramid positioned the pharaoh to join that endless cycle. The texts we found in later pyramids, the pyramid text, they're not eulogies. They're instruction manuals for transformation. Spells and incantations to help the deceased pharaoh navigate the afterlife, to become an imperishable star. These weren't tombs in our sense. They were transformation chambers. Launch pads to eternity. Here's where our modern perspective really fails us. We live in a largely secular world. We separate the practical from the sacred. Engineering is one thing, religion is another. But the ancient Egyptians, they saw no such division. The precise mathematics weren't separate from the spiritual purpose. They were part of it. The perfection of the structure was itself a religious act. It's like, and here's the analogy that really helps me grasp this, it's like a future archaeologist finding a modern hospital and concluding it was built just to showcase medical technology. Look at these sophisticated instruments, these complex machines. They'd be missing entirely that it's about healing, compassion, and saving lives. The technology isn't the point. It's the vessel for something deeper. That's what we do when we marvel at the pyramid's engineering while ignoring their sacred purpose. And understanding this context, it doesn't diminish the achievement. If anything, it enhances it, because it shows us something profound about human beings. When people believe deeply in something, when they're connected to a purpose larger than themselves, they can accomplish extraordinary things. Think about the coordination required. 20,000 workers, rotating through in seasonal shifts, working for 2 decades. That's not just logistics. That's shared belief. That's an entire civilization aligned around a common understanding of how the universe works and their role in maintaining it. Workers who left graffiti saying the Friends of Khufu, they weren't just proud of their craftsmanship. They were proud to participate in something cosmically important. They were helping to ensure the sun would continue to rise. We apply our engineering-focused mindset, how many tons, what precision, which tools, to people who thought in completely different categories. For them, the pyramid was simultaneously a building, a sacred text, a machine, and a gateway, all at once. They didn't separate these concepts the way we do. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Our ancestors weren't less intelligent than us. They weren't more primitive or less capable. They were differently educated, yes. They had different frameworks for understanding the world. But within those frameworks, they achieved something that still staggers us 4,500 years later. The pyramids stand as a testament not just to engineering, but to what humans can do when united by belief. When a society decides something matters, really, deeply matters, there's almost nothing we can't accomplish. So next time someone asks you how the Egyptians built the pyramids, maybe the real answer is, they built them the same way any civilization builds something eternal. With skill, yes. With organization, absolutely. But most of all, with purpose. With a shared understanding of why it mattered. And that, I think, is something we could stand to learn from them. How do you think future civilizations might misunderstand something we build today? But before we leave behind the question of how future generations might see us, let's turn to something the pyramids teach us that goes deeper than engineering or astronomy. Something about karma, causality, and what stone remembers. Now, this is where things get truly fascinating. Because stone doesn't just record shape, it records the soul of those who shaped it. Every decision made during the pyramid's construction, every kindness, every moment of care, became part of its fabric. And you can still see that even now, 45 centuries later. Think about what we know. The workers weren't slaves. They were paid in bread and beer. When they broke bones, and they did, this was dangerous work, Someone set those fractures. Someone took the time to heal them. We know this because archaeologists have found their skeletons, and the bones show professional medical care. That compassion? It's fossilized now. Embedded in history like amber, preserves ancient life. And here's what gets me. Those workers left graffiti. How declarations like the Friends of Khufu carved right into the stones they placed. This wasn't just construction. It was dignified labor. People who felt respected enough to sign their work. Now compare that to other structures throughout history, monuments built through oppression, through forced labor. Many of them crumbled. Not always from poor engineering, but from something harder to measure. The resentment of those forced to build them. People who are coerced can't create the eternal. They just can't. There's something about the human spirit that refuses to pour excellence into chains. But the Great Pyramid, that 2.1 centimeter precision across 230 meters, that's not just mathematics. That's the physical manifestation of respect. When you treat people justly, they pour excellence into their work. It's that simple. Like a tree ring recording not just years but droughts and abundance. The pyramid records not just stone placement but every ethical choice. Medical care. The fair wages. The pride of craftsmen. Good treatment fossilized into excellence. And here's where karma operates on a timescale we rarely think about. 4,500 years later, Egypt is revered worldwide. Not because they conquered anyone. Not through military might. Through this monument. Tourism brings prosperity to modern Egypt. Scholars bring respect. Students bring wonder. The pyramid has become an eternal ambassador for a civilization that treated its workers with dignity. It's karma on a civilizational scale. What you build with justice transcends time, not just materially, but in meaning. You see, the karma of stones works slowly but perfectly. What we build with good will become something worthy of permanence. The pyramid whispers across millennia. We were treated well, so we built something that would last. And it has. Boy, has it lasted. I think about this sometimes when I see modern construction. When I pass by buildings going up, scaffolding everywhere, workers in hard hats. What are we embedding in those structures? What will they say about us 45 centuries from now, if they last that long? Because here's the thing we forget. Our moral choices don't just affect the present. They crystallize. They become legacy. They become stone. They become what future generations will inherit and judge us by. It's a humbling thought, isn't it? That everything we create carries the ethical weight of how it was created. Not just in some abstract philosophical sense, but in a real, physical way. The care we showed, or didn't show, to the people who built it, seeps into the very fabric of the thing itself. The pyramids teach us that permanence isn't just about engineering. It's about ethics. The two can't be separated. When you build something meant to last forever, the how matters as much as the what, maybe more. And that precision we marvel at, those perfect angles, those astronomical alignments, those millions of stones placed just so. Maybe it was only possible because the people placing them felt valued, felt seen, felt that their labor mattered, not just to the pharaoh, but to the cosmos itself. What modern structure do you think will be judged 4,500 years from now? And what will it reveal about how we treated those who built it? That's not just an interesting question. It's an urgent one. Because we're building that future right now. Every decision we make about labor, about dignity, about care, it's all being recorded. Not in papyrus or hieroglyphs, but in steel and concrete and glass. The stones are watching. They always have been. They're very patient stones. They have time to wait and see if what we build will whisper kindness across the centuries, or if it'll crumble back to dust. They're very patient stones. They have time to wait and see if what we build will whisper kindness across the centuries, or if it'll crumble back to dust. Which brings us to an interesting question. What if we tried to build a Great Pyramid today? Now, this isn't just idle speculation. Materials science researcher actually sat down and did the math. Building the Great Pyramid with modern methods would cost around $5 billion. That's less than a single aircraft carrier, if you're keeping score. We could absolutely do it. The question is, would we want to? Here's where things get fascinating. We could build it faster, much faster. Instead of 20 to 25 years, we're talking maybe 5 to 10. We've got cranes that can lift 80-ton blocks like they're cardboard boxes. We've got laser levels, GPS surveying, computer-aided design. We could cut limestone with diamond-tipped saws, pour concrete foundations that cure in days, not months. But here's the catch. The limiting factor wouldn't be technology. It'd be logistics. Think about it. Coordinating thousands of workers, hundreds of trucks, multiple suppliers, environmental impact assessments, safety inspections. Ancient Egyptians didn't need building permits. They didn't have to worry about carbon emissions or traffic congestion on the highway to Giza. They just needed stone, water, and an entire civilization aligned around a single purpose. We could use modern materials to make it lighter and stronger. Steel reinforcement running through the core. Modern concrete instead of stacked blocks. But if you wanted that same visual effect, that massive, smooth-sided limestone monument, you'd still be quarrying and shaping millions of tons of stone. And suddenly, you're back to dealing with the same basic physics the ancient Egyptians faced. Only now, you've got environmental regulations, labor laws that limit working hours, safety standards requiring hard hats and guardrails. These are good things, obviously. But they add layers of complexity that ancient builders never had to navigate. One architect I read about proposed something interesting. He said the most difficult part wouldn't be the engineering at all. It'd be finding the cultural will to do it. Why would modern society dedicate $5 billion and a decade of effort to building a pyramid? What would it mean to us? The ancient Egyptians built theirs as resurrection machines, as cosmic bridges between Earth and the eternal. They believed, truly believed, that their pharaoh needed this structure to maintain the order of the universe. That's a level of shared purpose we struggle to imagine today. It's like trying to recreate a handmade Persian rug with factory equipment. You could make something similar faster and cheaper, but you'd lose the meaning in the process. Pyramid wasn't just about stacking stones. It was about a society deciding collectively that this mattered enough to dedicate decades of labor to it. Think about what we build today that's meant to last thousands of years. Nuclear waste repositories, maybe. Warning markers for future civilizations to stay away from radioactive burial sites. It's telling, isn't it? Our longest-lasting monuments are warnings, not celebrations. The ancient Egyptians left us something that says, look what we achieved together. We're planning to leave signs that say, stay away, danger here. Now, I'm not saying we should build pyramids. We've got our own ways of reaching for something beyond ourselves. The James Webb Telescope, looking back toward the birth of the universe, the International Space Station, projects to preserve biodiversity. But these are practical endeavors with clear purposes. They're not about leaving a mark that lasts for millennia just because we can. Maybe that's fine. Maybe the pyramid's real lesson isn't about engineering at all. It's about what happens when you combine three things: technical knowledge, massive resources, and a shared belief that what you're building matters beyond your own lifetime. The ancient Egyptians had all three. We've got the first two in abundance. It's the third one we struggle with. We could build a perfect replica of the Great Pyramid tomorrow. We have the technology. We have the resources. What we don't have is a compelling reason that would unite enough people to make it happen. And that's not a failure of engineering. It's just a different kind of society with different priorities. But here's what strikes me about this thought experiment. It reveals that the ancient Egyptians' real achievement wasn't just in the physics and geometry. It was in the social organization, the shared purpose. The ability to coordinate tens of thousands of people over decades toward a single goal. That's actually harder than moving stone blocks. Any society with enough resources can figure out the mechanics of construction. But creating the social cohesion to sustain a multi-generational project? That's the real engineering marvel. So if modern society decided to build a monument meant to last 4,500 years, what should it represent? Not a tomb. Not a warning. Maybe something that says, we were here. We worked together. We believed in something beyond ourselves. Just like the pyramid whispers across the centuries. Only this time, we'd know exactly what we're saying to the future. And we'd hope they'd understand. Imagine standing inside the Great Pyramid, in the narrow passage they call the King's Chamber. Above you, carved through hundreds of tons of limestone, there's a shaft. It's maybe 20 centimeters wide, angled precisely upward through the stone. And if you could travel back 4,500 years and look up through that shaft at night, you'd see something remarkable. A single star, perfectly framed. Tuban Doi, the pole star of ancient Egypt. That shaft wasn't pointing at just any star. It was aligned with what the Egyptians called the imperishable stars, the ones that never set, that circled the northern sky eternally. Them, this wasn't astronomy. It was theology. That shaft was meant to be the pharaoh's pathway to the heavens, his ladder to immortality. There's another shaft, too, pointing south from the same chamber. That one aimed at the constellation we know as Orion's belt. But the Egyptians didn't see a hunter's belt. They saw Sa, the celestial form of Osiris, god of resurrection and the afterlife. These weren't decorative touches. These were literal highways to divinity, carved in stone. Now, here's where it gets truly fascinating. If you stood in that shaft today and looked up, Thuban wouldn't be there. Not in the same position, anyway. The Earth wobbles on its axis. Astronomers call it precession. It's like a spinning top that's starting to slow down, tracing a slow circle in space. This wobble takes about 26,000 years to complete one full cycle. And it means our North Star changes. Thuban was their North Star. Laris is ours. In another 13,000 years, it'll be something else entirely. The pyramid is a time capsule, but not the way we usually mean that phrase. It's not holding artifacts or messages. It's holding the sky itself. Those shafts still point exactly where they were aimed, but the stars have moved. Or rather, we've moved. The Earth has drifted in its cosmic dance, and those ancient alignments are now pointing at empty space, like an old photograph of a landscape that's since changed. Something haunting about that, isn't there? Standing beneath a shaft that once framed a star, knowing it's no longer there. It's like receiving a letter addressed to someone at your house who moved out decades ago. The precision is still perfect. The intention is still clear. But time has shifted everything around it. And make no mistake, that precision required serious astronomical knowledge. The Egyptians didn't have computers or telescopes. They had their eyes, their patience, and decades of careful observation. They tracked the stars the way you might track old friends, learning their patterns, their habits, their rhythms across the seasons. They knew exactly where Thuban would be on any given night of any given season. They could predict stellar positions years in advance. Think about that for a moment. When was the last time you spent an hour just looking at the stars? Really looking, not through an app that labels them for you, but actually watching them move across the sky. Most of us haven't. We've got light pollution, smartphones, indoor lives. We've outsourced celestial observation to computers. But ancient Egyptians, they lived under those stars. Every night, the sky was their clock, their calendar, their GPS, their mythology, all rolled into one. They knew the stars the way you know your neighborhood. They could navigate by them, tell time by them, mark the seasons by their rising and setting. That kind of knowledge doesn't come from occasional stargazing. It comes from generations of accumulated wisdom, passed down and refined. Like an old compass that points to magnetic north from centuries ago. It still works perfectly, but the Earth itself has shifted, making it a bridge between then and now. That's what those pyramid shafts are. Perfect instruments, still functioning exactly as designed, but pointing at a different sky than they were meant for. And here's something I find genuinely moving. The Egyptians didn't need that precision. A shaft angled roughly upward would have served the symbolic purpose just fine for their religion. But they did it anyway. They measured. They calculated. They aligned those shafts to within fractions of a degree. Not because they had to, but because they could. Because precision mattered to them. Because the pharaoh's journey to the stars deserved exactness. You know, maybe the alien technology narrative persists partly because we've lost this kind of connection to the cosmos. We look at the precision of those stellar alignments and think, how could anyone without computers know the stars that well? But the answer's simple. They looked. Night after night, year after year, generation after generation. They were astronomers not because they had advanced technology, but because they had something we've largely lost. An intimate, daily relationship with the night sky. Real alien technology isn't in the pyramids. It's in us. It's our human capacity to observe, to remember, to calculate, to care enough about something that will spend decades perfecting it. The Egyptians didn't need help from the stars to build a pathway to them. They just needed time, attention, and the stubborn human belief that we can touch the eternal if we're careful enough. Precise enough, patient enough. Those shafts are still there. Still pointing. Still perfect. The stars have moved on, but the stone remembers where they were. And in that gap, between where the shafts point and where the stars now are, you can measure the passage of time itself, carved in limestone and starlight. When was the last time you spent an hour just looking at the stars? We spent the last hour together, walking through explanations. You now know about copper saws and wet sand, about work gangs who called themselves the drunkards of Menkaure, about internal ramps and cosmic ray muons. You understand the mathematics, the organization, the sheer human persistence it took to stack 2.5 million stones into something that would outlast empires. And yet, there's still a part of you that wants to believe in the mystery, isn't there? A part that hears alien technology and feels a little thrill, even knowing what you know now. That's not a weakness. It's deeply, beautifully human. The alien theory persists, not because the evidence supports it, but because it fulfills something we need. We want to believe we're not alone in the universe. We want to think there's more waiting to be discovered, hidden beneath our feet or between the stones. When we look at the pyramids and whisper impossible, what we're really saying is, I want to be amazed. Here's what's remarkable. The truth, the real, documented, archaeologically verified truth, is more inspiring than any fiction about visitors from the stars. Real humans built these monuments. People who got hungry and tired, who laughed with their coworkers, who went home to families, who probably complained about their supervisors just like we do. They had no computers, no cranes, no lasers. What they had was ingenuity, cooperation, and something we've been talking around this entire time. The audacity to imagine something impossible and then spend decades making it real. The pyramids remind us that our ancestors weren't less intelligent than we are. They were just differently educated. They knew things we've forgotten. How to read the stars without telescopes, how to move massive weights without engines, how to organize thousands of people toward a single purpose that none of them would live to see completed. That's the real alien technology, if you think about it. The human mind itself. Our ability to plan across generations. To believe in something larger than our individual lives. To look at a desert plateau and see, in our mind's eye, a monument that will still be standing when our language is dead and our cities are dust. These structures endure not because of who built them, but because of what they represent. Human ambition, human cooperation. The desire, maybe the need, to touch eternity, to leave something behind that says, we were here. We mattered. We could create beauty that outlasts our brief moment under the sun. You'll notice I haven't tried to completely strip away the wonder. Understanding doesn't diminish beauty. It's like choosing to watch a sunset even after you've learned about light refraction through atmospheric particles. Physics don't make the colors less vivid. If anything, knowing how rare this particular arrangement of star and planet and atmosphere is makes the sunset more precious. The same is true here. Knowing that real people like you, designed these pyramids, argued over the plans, solved unprecedented engineering challenges, celebrated when sections came together perfectly. That doesn't make the pyramids smaller. It makes us bigger. It expands what we believe humans are capable of. As you drift off tonight, I want you to hold this thought. Somewhere around 2560 BC, a worker in a quarry, let's call him Nacht, though we'll never know his real name, carved his crew's mark into a block of limestone. The friends of Khufu.id. He was proud of his work. He wanted future generations to know his team had been there. 4,500 years later, here you are, lying in darkness, thinking about Nacht and his crew. Their names are lost, but their work remains. They touched eternity in the most human way possible, by building something with such care, such precision, such meaning, that even when their civilization fell, even when their language became unreadable, even when their gods were forgotten, their monument still stood. Their monument still stood. You're connected to them now, across an unimaginable gulf of time. They looked at the same stars you see, wondered about the same questions, felt the same desire to be remembered. The alien mystery is entertaining, sure. But this connection, this thread of shared humanity stretching back 45 centuries, this is what makes the pyramids sacred. So sleep well, knowing this. You carry their legacy. Every time you create something with care, every time you work toward a goal you might not live to see, every time you believe humans can accomplish the seemingly impossible, you're honoring those ancient builders who looked at an empty desert and decided to fill it with wonder. Mystery remains. But it's not about aliens or lost technology or hidden chambers. The mystery is us. What we can do when we truly try. What we can build when we work together. What we can leave behind that whispers to the future. We were here. We mattered. And that's worth far more than any answer from the stars. What's one mystery you actually prefer to keep unsolved? The Great Pyramid of Giza. You've probably seen 1,000 pictures of it. Maybe you've even visited. But here's something that might surprise you. When European scholars first encountered it during the Age of Enlightenment, an era that prided itself on reason and measurement, they couldn't make sense of what they were looking at. Not because it was mysterious in some mystical way, but because the precision was so extraordinary, it defied their understanding of what ancient people could achieve. Let me give you a number that'll put this in perspective. The base of the Great Pyramid is level to within 2.1 centimeters. Now, that might not sound remarkable until you realize we're talking about a base that spans 230 meters on each side. That's roughly the length of 2.5 soccer fields. Imagine trying to level a soccer field to within less than an inch of variation. Now imagine doing it without lasers, without GPS, without any modern surveying equipment whatsoever. Just rope, water, and your understanding of the stars. And it's not just level. The sides of the pyramid align almost perfectly with true north, south, east, and west. The error, 3/60ths of a single degree. That's the kind of precision modern construction aims for, and often misses. When Napoleon's engineers surveyed the Giza plateau in 1798, they did something curious. They calculated how much stone was contained in all three pyramids, Khufu's, Khafre's, and Menkaura's, and worked out that you could build a wall around the entire country of France with that material. A wall 3 meters high and 1 meter thick, encircling the whole nation. Think about that for a moment. Not a single building, but enough material to fence in an entire country. Here's another way to grasp the scale. The Great Pyramid was the tallest human-made structure on Earth for 3,800 years, 38 centuries. It held that record until Lincoln Cathedral completed its spire in 1311 AD. No other building in history has held that title for even close to that long. Now, when modern engineers look at structures like this, they're not baffled because they think it's impossible. They know it's possible because, well, it's standing right there. What puzzles them is the how. How did a Bronze Age civilization, without iron tools, without wheeled vehicles for transport, without any of the technologies we associate with precision construction, create something that modern builders, armed with lasers and computers, struggle to match? It's like trying to build a skyscraper where every floor must be perfectly level, but you only have rope, water, and the stars to guide you. And yet, floor after floor, you get it right. For 2.3 million stone blocks. This is where the imagination starts to fill in gaps. We can't immediately see how something was done. Our minds reach for explanations. And somewhere along the way, people started reaching pretty far. They started suggesting that maybe ancient humans had help. Maybe they had access to knowledge or technology that's been lost. Maybe, and this is where things get really speculative, they weren't working alone. But here's what's truly remarkable, and what we're going to explore together. They were alone. There were no advanced, lost civilizations. No alien visitors. No hidden technology. What built the pyramids was something far more extraordinary than any of that. Human ingenuity under constraints we can barely imagine. Think about it. We live in a world where, if we need to move a massive stone, we call in a crane. If we need to cut a block precisely, we use diamond-tip saws and laser measurements. If we need to align something with true north, we pull out a GPS device. We've outsourced so much of our problem-solving to technology that we've almost forgotten what the human mind is capable of when it has nothing but basic tools and infinite creativity. The pyramid builders didn't have less intelligence than us. They didn't have smaller brains or inferior reasoning skills. They just had different tools, different knowledge, and different constraints. And when you're constrained, when you can't just buy a solution off the shelf, that's when true innovation happens. So that's what this is really about. Not alien technology hidden inside the pyramids, but human technology. Brilliant, patient, methodical human technology that solved problems in ways we're only now beginning to fully understand and appreciate. Over the coming sections, we're going to walk through this mystery together. We'll look at the myths and why they emerged. We'll examine the actual tools and techniques the builders used. We'll talk about the mathematics, the workforce, the cultural context, all the pieces that come together to paint a picture not of impossibility, but of possibility realized through dedication and ingenuity. And by the end, I think you'll find that the truth is far more inspiring than any fiction about ancient aliens could ever be. If you could ask the pyramid builders one question, what would it be? Think about that as we continue. Because in a way, archaeologists and historians have been asking questions of these ancient engineers for centuries, and the stones themselves have been answering, if we're willing to listen. And yet, despite all this evidence, despite the tools and the graffiti, and the mathematical precision we can measure and understand, there's a theory that just won't go away. You've probably heard it. Maybe you've even wondered about it yourself. The idea that ancient humans couldn't possibly have built the pyramids alone, that they must have had help from somewhere beyond our world. Here's the thing though. This theory, it's not ancient at all. The ancient alien explanation for the pyramids didn't emerge from lost texts or mysterious discoveries. It came from a Swiss hotel manager named Erich von Däniken, who published a book in 1968 called Chariots of the Gods. That's right, 1968. The summer of love had just happened. We'd recently put humans in orbit. And von Däniken looked at the pyramids and said, essentially, ancient people were too primitive to build this. It must have been aliens. None. Now, pause for a moment on that word. Primitive. Wow. It's doing a lot of heavy lifting there, isn't it? Because what von Däniken was really saying, what he might not have even fully realized he was saying, reveals more about his own biases and about ancient Egyptians. He looked at non-European civilizations and assumed they couldn't achieve sophisticated engineering without outside help. That assumption, that's not archaeology. That's prejudice, dressed up as mystery. But the timing matters. The theory didn't just appear randomly in 1968. This was the height of the space race. The United States and Soviet Union were competing to reach the moon. Everyone was looking up, wondering what was out there, imagining first contact. In that cultural moment, the idea of ancient astronauts visiting Earth felt exciting, almost plausible. We were so focused on going to the stars ourselves that we wondered if someone else had already made that journey to us. And here's where it gets interesting. The theory didn't fade away. It grew. Television discovered that mystery attracts viewers far more reliably than solutions do. Documentaries with titles like Ancient Aliens or Unexplained Mysteries became entire franchises. They'd show the pyramids, cut to someone saying we just don't know how they did it, and let the audience's imagination fill in the blanks. Never mind that we actually do know quite a lot about how they did it. Mystery sells. Answers don't. Think about it like this. Imagine someone visits your house and sees the plumbing working perfectly. Water flows when you turn the tap. The toilet flushes. But this person has never seen plumbing before, doesn't understand pressure systems or pipe networks. So they conclude you must have a time machine, because how else could water magically appear and disappear? The mystery says more about what they don't know than about what's actually mysterious. That's what's happening with the alien pyramid theory. It offers a simple answer to genuinely complex engineering questions. Why is it so precise? Aliens. How did they move those stones? Aliens. It's intellectually comfortable in a strange way. You don't have to wrestle with the actual complexity of ancient engineering if you can just attribute it to beings with incomprehensible technology. There's something deeper here, something about human psychology worth examining. We love mysteries. That's not a bad thing. Curiosity drives discovery. But we also have this tendency to underestimate people who came before us, especially if they lived in radically different circumstances. We see ancient Egyptians without computers, without cranes, without the Industrial Revolution, and we think, how could they possibly be as clever as us? That's the real myth that won't die. Not the alien theory specifically, but the idea that technological advancement equals intelligence. The ancient Egyptians weren't less smart than we are. They were differently educated, working with different tools, but solving problems with the same human ingenuity we use today. They observed. They experimented. They failed. They learned. They passed knowledge down through generations. And here's the uncomfortable truth buried in this whole narrative. There's a problematic undertone to the ancient alien theory that we need to name directly. When you look at which civilizations get subjected to these theories most often, a pattern emerges. The pyramids of Egypt, the stone heads of Easter Island, the temples of Central America, ... Notice something. These theories cluster around the achievements of non-European civilizations. Medieval European cathedrals are rarely attributed to aliens, even though they too required incredible engineering and mathematical precision. That should make us pause. It should make us ask whose history we're willing to respect and whose we're willing to explain away. Understanding why the myth appeals to us, that's almost as interesting as understanding the pyramids themselves. Because in wanting there to be more to the story, in wanting the builders to be something other than human, we're revealing our own sense of disconnection from the past. We've become so removed from traditional craftsmanship, from working with our hands, from the patient application of simple tools over long periods, that we've forgotten what humans are capable of when they focus. The myth won't die because we keep it alive. Not through evidence, but through wonder misdirected. We look at the pyramids and feel awe. We should. But then we channel that awe into fantasy, rather than respect for the actual human beings who planned, sweated, problem-solved, and triumphed. So as we move forward, let's hold on to the wonder, but redirect it where it belongs. Not toward imagined star travelers, but toward the real architects, engineers, and workers who achieved something genuinely remarkable without alien technology, with human hands, human minds, and human determination. Because that story? That's so much better than the myth. And really, isn't that the question we should be asking? Not Jamu built the pyramids, but Avao. Because here's the thing, we actually know. We know exactly what tools they used. And when you see them, you might be a bit underwhelmed at first. Copper chisels, wooden sledges, stone hammers. That's it. That's the alien technology everyone's been looking for. But wait, you're thinking, copper? Copper's soft. You can bend it with your hands. How do you cut limestone with something softer than the stone itself? This is where things get truly fascinating. Because the ancient Egyptians weren't trying to cut stone with copper alone. They were using copper saws with quartz sand as an abrasive. It's brilliant, really. The copper holds the sand in place, and the sand, which is harder than limestone, does the actual cutting. Modern experiments have proven this works beautifully. It's like discovering that a master chef's secret ingredient is actually just salt used at exactly the right moment. Magic isn't in the tool. It's in the technique. And we're not guessing here. Archaeologists have found these tools at quarry sites. The quarry marks are still visible on unfinished stones, frozen in time, showing us exactly where the workers left off. It's like finding the original construction notes stuffed inside the walls. Now, here's something that surprises most people. The ancient Egyptians didn't have the wheel for transportation. At least, not for moving these massive stones. But they had something better. Wooden sledges on wet sand. Yes, wet sand. 2014 study in Physical Review Letters, Actual Modern Physics, showed that wetting sand reduces friction by about 50%. When sand is dry, it piles up in front of whatever you're dragging. But add water? The grains stick together just enough to create a firm, slippery surface. It's the difference between dragging furniture across carpet versus a smooth floor. And here's the kicker. We thought we were so clever figuring this out with modern science. Then Egyptologists looked more carefully at tomb paintings. Paintings that have been studied for over a century, and noticed something. There's a worker at the front of the sledge pouring water from a jar onto the sand. What we dismissed as ceremonial or symbolic. That was engineering documentation. They were literally showing us how they did it, and we weren't paying attention. You have to respect that level of practical thinking. They didn't need to understand the physics of friction coefficients. They just knew, wet sand, heavy loads slide easier. Done. But what about the really hard stuff? The granite? Because limestone is one thing, but the king's chamber is lined with granite blocks weighing up to 80 tons each. You can't saw through granite with copper and sand. Not efficiently anyway. So they used dolerite pounders. These are extremely hard volcanic stones, and the Egyptians used them like hammers. They'd pound the granite over and over, pulverizing it grain by grain, until they'd shaped it exactly how they wanted. Thousands of these pounders have been found at quarry sites, worn smooth from use. Some are so worn down, they're half their original size. Imagine that for a moment. The patience required. The organization. You'd need teams of workers rotating in shifts, pounding granite for weeks to shape a single block. It's not mysterious. It's just staggering. And that's what dissolves the mystery, doesn't it? When you realize they had time, organization, and clever application of simple physics. They had a massive workforce during the flood season when farming was impossible. They had decades to complete the work. They had engineers who understood leverage and friction and weight distribution, even if they'd never heard those terms. Every block placed was a solved problem. Every precisely cut edge was hours of careful work. The pyramid isn't evidence of alien technology. It's a monument to human persistence. There's something deeply satisfying about this, I think. It puts the achievement back where it belongs, with the people who actually did the work. Not with hypothetical aliens who swooped in and built it overnight. With real humans who woke up, ate their bread and beer, and spent their days cutting stone under the desert sun. These weren't people less capable than us. They were people exactly as clever as us, working with the materials they had available. And honestly, that makes what they accomplished so much more impressive. Because anyone can do something impossible with imaginary technology, but doing something that seems impossible with copper, sand, water, and stone, that takes real human ingenuity. The kind that makes you stop and think, what are we capable of when we really try? So the next time someone tells you the pyramids must have been built by aliens, you can smile and say, actually, they were built by something far more remarkable. People. Just people. People like us. Ninsions. People like us. And you know what's interesting? People like us are really good at seeing patterns, even when they're not there. We look at clouds and see faces. We glance at our clock at exactly 11:11 and think the universe is winking at us. So when we stand before the Great Pyramid and notice that the ratio of its perimeter to its height comes out to roughly 2, our pattern-seeking brains light up like a Christmas tree. K encoded P. We think K must have known advanced mathematics. But here's the thing. That ratio, it might just be a coincidence. I know. That's not nearly as exciting. But think about it this way. If you're building a pyramid using the sekhet, which was the ancient Egyptian unit for measuring slope, and you're aiming for a stable, aesthetically pleasing structure, you'll naturally arrive at certain proportions. It's like a carpenter who can cut perfect 45-degree angles without ever learning trigonometry. The knowledge is in the hands, in the practice, not in the theory. Now, don't get me wrong. Some people have claimed the pyramids encode all sorts of cosmic secrets. The speed of light, the distance from the Earth to the Sun, the exact diameter of the Moon. And if you squint hard enough, cherry-pick your units, and ignore the measurements that don't fit, sure, you can make numbers say almost anything. Convert meters to cubits, multiply by your chosen constant, divide by the age of the pharaoh's cat. Eventually, you'll land on something that looks meaningful. But what's genuinely remarkable isn't these supposed codes. It's the sekhet itself. This simple measurement of slope shows us that the Egyptians understood ratios in a deeply practical way. They didn't need calculus to know that if you want your pyramid to not collapse, you need a specific relationship between height and base. They built enough structures to know what worked. That's empirical mathematics. That's engineering. And here's something that should absolutely blow your mind. The 3-4-5 triangle appears throughout Egyptian architecture. You know what that is? It's a Pythagorean triple, a right triangle with sides measuring 3, 4, and 5 units. It creates a perfect 90-degree angle every single time. The Egyptians used it constantly for laying out buildings, ensuring corners were square, getting everything aligned. The catch: this was centuries before Pythagoras was even born. See, we've named the theorem after a Greek philosopher, but the Egyptians were using this principle long before anyone wrote it down as a formal proof. They didn't sit around proving theorems. They didn't need to. They had something better. They had solutions. Practical, tested, reliable solutions to real-world problems. And honestly, that's often more useful than theoretical mathematics. Egyptian math was all about getting things done. They had methods for calculating areas, for dividing rations fairly among workers, for determining the slope of a pyramid face. Their mathematical papyri, the ones that survived, read less like textbooks and more like engineering manuals. Here is how you do this. Here's how you do that. No proofs. No abstract theorems. Just, this works, we've tested it, use it. And that worked perfectly for building pyramids. You see, the pyramids, adodo, embody sophisticated mathematics. Absolutely they do. But it's the mathematics of engineering, not mystical numerical codes beamed down from the stars. Every angle, every measurement, every massive block placed with such precision, it all came from human beings who understood ratios, who grasped spatial relationships, who knew that if you want to stack millions of tons of stone without it toppling, you'd better get your math right. Sometimes the simplest explanation is correct. And the simplest explanation here is this. They were excellent mathematicians, solving construction problems, not encoding the secrets of the universe, not hiding alien formulas in stone, just building the most impressive tomb they could for their god king, using the best mathematical tools they had. There's something beautiful about that, isn't it? We don't need to attribute cosmic knowledge to them to be impressed. The practical genius, the ability to look at a massive project and figure out, step by step, how to make it real. That's impressive enough. Because here's what we forget. Mathematics doesn't start with proofs and theorems. It starts with counting, with measuring, with someone somewhere noticing that this pile of grain is bigger than that pile, and figuring out how to describe that difference. The Egyptians were incredible mathematicians not despite their practical focus, but because of it. They learned by doing, by trial and error, by building something, seeing where it failed, and adjusting. And the Great Pyramid, it's the result of centuries of that learning. Every failed mastaba, every stepped pyramid that came before, they were all lessons, all data points. The Great Pyramid is what happens when you take generations of practical mathematical knowledge and apply it to one grand, almost insane project. No aliens required, just humans figuring things out, one measurement at a time. Do you think ancient civilizations could have had mathematical knowledge that we've lost or just don't recognize? It's worth considering. Not because they had secret cosmic formulas, but because they approached problems differently than we do. Maybe there's wisdom in that practical, empirical approach. Maybe we've gotten so focused on theoretical mathematics that we've forgotten how powerful simple, tested methods can be. The pyramid doesn't whisper secrets of the cosmos, but it does whisper something else. Will we understood enough? And that, I think, is worth far more than any mystical code. But understanding the math is one thing. Understanding the Ye people, now, that's where the story truly comes alive. Because here's what most of us picture when we think of the pyramids. Thousands of slaves, whips cracking, bodies collapsing under impossible burdens. It's dramatic. It's been burned into our minds by decades of Hollywood spectacle. And it's completely wrong. The archaeology tells a different story. Better one. In the 1980s and 90s, archaeologist Mark Lehner began excavating near the pyramids. And what he found wasn't evidence of oppression, it was evidence of community. Workers, villages, bakeries that could produce thousands of loaves daily, breweries, and perhaps most telling, skeletal remains showing healed fractures. Bones that had been carefully set and allowed to mend. Think about that for a moment. Someone broke their arm moving stone. And rather than being discarded or left to suffer, they were treated, cared for, given time to heal. This wasn't a death camp. It was a job site with medical care. But it gets better. These workers were paid roughly 10 loaves of bread and a gallon of beer per day. Now, you might think beer. They were paying people in beer. But in ancient Egypt, beer wasn't quite what you're imagining. It was thick, nutritious, partially filtered, more like liquid bread than a modern lager. Between the bread and the beer, workers were receiving around 3,500 to 4,000 calories a day. That's a respectable wage. That's fuel for hard labor. And then there's the graffiti. Oh, the graffiti. Because these workers didn't just build the pyramids, they insigned them. Work gangs left marks on the blocks they placed. The friends of Khufu, the drunkards of Menkaura. Can you imagine? Thousands of years later, we can still read their team names. They weren't anonymous sufferers. They were crews with identity, with pride, with a sense of competition. You don't name your team the drunkards of Menkaura if you're being brutalized. You do that if you've got camaraderie, if there's banter, if you're trying to one-up the crew working on the neighboring block. Now, here's where the practicality becomes fascinating. Egypt's economy was deeply tied to the Nile. Every year, the river flooded, covering the farmland for months. During that time, farming was impossible. So what do you do with tens of thousands of farmers who suddenly have no work? You could let social order fray, let people go hungry, or you could mobilize them for a national project. The pyramids weren't just monuments. They were economic engines, employment programs, a way to keep society cohesive and productive during the months when the land was underwater. Current estimates suggest around 20,000 to 30,000 workers cycled through at any given time. Not millions. Not slaves chained for life. Rotational labor. People who worked for a season, earned their bread and beer, then returned to their farms when the floods receded. It's a completely different picture, isn't it? This wasn't slavery. It was civic participation on a staggering scale. Think of it like building a cathedral in medieval Europe. It took generations. It required the whole community, stone cutters, laborers, engineers, artists. But it was also about more than just the building itself. It was about identity, about what it meant to be part of that society, about contributing to something that would outlast you. The pyramid was Egypt's cathedral, and the workers weren't victims. They were builders, contributors to something eternal. There's something deeply moving about that realization. These weren't faceless masses. They were people with names, with teams, with injuries that were tended to. They drank beer after a long day. They competed with other crews. They carved their names into history because they were proud of what they were creating. And you know what? That pride is still there. Carved into limestone, written in red ochre, buried in workers' villages that are only now being excavated and understood. The human story behind the pyramids is so much richer than any alien narrative, because it's gore story. It's what people can accomplish when they work together towards something greater than themselves. So tonight, as you think about those massive stone blocks rising into the desert sky, don't picture slaves. Picture teams. Picture the friends of Khufu hoisting another block into place, joking about the drunkards on the next tier. Picture the baker who ensured everyone had their 10 loaves. Picture the healer who set broken bones. Picture humanity at its best. And if you were part of a pyramid work gang, what would you name your team? Now, those names, the friends of Khufu, the drunkards of Menkaura, they tell us something profound. These weren't just workers. They were people with pride, with humor, with identity. They left their mark in stone, quite literally. But there's another mark left in stone. Another story whispered through the ages. And this one's wrapped in mystery and moonlight. Let's talk about Thoth. In ancient Egyptian mythology, Thoth was the god of wisdom, writing, and magic. He was depicted with the head of an ibis, holding a stylus, forever recording the secrets of the universe. The Egyptians believed Thoth had written down all knowledge, everything from the movements of stars to the formulas for resurrection, and hidden it away in a sacred library. Hall of records, if you will. Now, here's where things get fascinating. This legend didn't stay buried in ancient texts. It came roaring back to life in the 20th century through a man named Edgar Cayce. Cayce was a psychic who claimed, during trance states, that he could access information about past lives and lost civilizations. And in the 1930s, he made a startling claim. Beneath the Sphinx, there was a hole of records containing the advanced technology of Atlantis. Yes, Atlantis. That legendary sunken civilization Plato wrote about. According to Casey, this chamber held proof that an advanced civilization predated the Egyptians, and that the pyramids and Sphinx were built by these Atlantean refugees using technology we still can't comprehend. We still can't comprehend. He even gave a date. The chamber would be discovered before the end of the 20th century. It's 2025 now. Spoiler alert, we haven't found it. But that hasn't stopped people from looking. And, honestly, you can understand the appeal, can't you? The idea that beneath our feet, hidden in the sand, there's a library containing all the wisdom of a lost super-civilization. It's intoxicating. It's the ultimate buried treasure story. So what does the evidence actually tell us? Ground-penetrating radar has been used extensively around the Giza plateau. This technology can see through stone and sand, revealing voids, chambers, anything with different density than the surrounding material. If there were massive chambers beneath the Sphinx, rooms filled with ancient technology, they'd show up as clear as day. And there are anomalies, small variations in density, but nothing that suggests vast libraries or hidden rooms full of Atlantean artifacts. In 2017, scientists discovered something genuinely exciting using cosmic ray muons, particles from space that pass through everything but interact differently with air versus stone. They found what they called the big void inside the Great Pyramid itself. A space as large as a passenger jet, right above the Grand Gallery. Now, ancient alien enthusiasts jumped on this. Secret chamber. Hidden knowledge. But archaeologists have a simpler explanation. It's likely a weight-relieving chamber, an intentional architectural feature designed to reduce pressure on the structure below. Egyptians used this technique in other parts of the pyramid. It's brilliant engineering, not a secret library. You see, the legend of the Hall of Records persists because it taps into something deeply human. We've always imagined that ancient wisdom might be hidden somewhere, waiting for the right person to discover it. It's the narrative structure of every adventure story you've ever loved. But here's the thing, and this is where reality becomes more interesting than myth. We don't need a fictional Hall of Records. The ancient Egyptians already built one. It was called the Library of Alexandria. Founded around 300 BC, it was one of the largest and most significant libraries of the ancient world. Scholars estimate it contained hundreds of thousands of scrolls. Mathematics, astronomy, medicine, literature, philosophy, all gathered in one place. The real repository of ancient knowledge wasn't hidden beneath the sand. It was right there, open to scholars, actively used. And while the Library of Alexandria was eventually destroyed, a tragedy that still echoes through history, much of what the Egyptians knew survived. It's carved into temple walls. It's written in hieroglyphic texts on papyrus. It's documented in tomb paintings that show everything from surgical procedures to agricultural techniques. The real knowledge was never hidden. It was just waiting to be translated. It's like searching for buried treasure in your backyard while completely ignoring the historical documents sitting in your attic. Mystery distracts us from the actual wonder. And the actual wonder is this. The ancient Egyptians were meticulous record keepers. They documented their world with extraordinary detail. Every pharaoh's reign, every building project, every religious ritual, it's all there, carved in stone, written on papyrus, preserved in the dry desert air. We don't need Atlantean technology to explain the pyramids. We have the Egyptians' own words, their own tools, their own techniques. They told us how they did it. We just had to learn to listen. So if you could find one piece of lost ancient knowledge, what would you want it to be? Their star charts? Their mathematical proofs? The complete works of their literature? Think about that for a moment. Because the truth is, we're still discovering their knowledge. Still translating texts. Still learning from people who lived 4,500 years ago. And that's not a mystery. That's a conversation across time. And so, these voices from the past aren't speaking to us through legend or interpretation. They're speaking to us through something far more direct. Evidence. Now, this is where things get truly fascinating. Because when people talk about mysteries and alien theories, they're often searching for proof that doesn't exist. The pyramid builders, they left us proof everywhere. They just didn't think we'd need convincing. Inside the Great Pyramid, hidden in places tourists will never see, there are quarry marks. Work gang graffiti, essentially. And these marks include cartouches, royal seals, with Khufu's name on them. Think about that for a moment. These aren't ceremonial inscriptions carved for show. These are the ancient equivalent of made by Team Khufu scrawled in red ochre paint on stone blocks, while they were still in the quarry. They're in the relieving chambers above the king's chamber. Spaces deliberately left empty to distribute weight away from the burial chamber below. No one was meant to see these marks. No tourist, no priest, no pharaoh. They're there purely because the workers marked their stones the way you might initial a package before shipping it. And that makes forgery essentially impossible. You'd have to disassemble the pyramid, fake ancient paint in a style that matches thousands of other authentic marks, reassemble millions of tons of stone, and hope nobody notices. It's ridiculous. But it gets better. The quarries themselves are still there. You can visit them today. And at Aswan, at Tura, you'll find half-extracted blocks still connected to bedrock. Frozen mid-extraction, like someone just put down their tools for lunch 4,000 years ago. The copper chisel marks are still visible in the stone. You can run your fingers along the grooves. It's like finding the original architect's blueprints stuffed in the walls during a renovation. Except in this case, the blueprints are carved into the very bones of the earth. Now, skeptics will point to artifacts like the inventory stela. It's a stone tablet that claims the Sphinx was already ancient when Khufu built his pyramid. And if that's true, it throws everything we know into question, right? Well, no. Because archaeologists examined the stela carefully. And it's a fake. Not a modern fake. An ancient fake. It dates to the 26th dynasty, more than 2,000 years after the pyramids were built. Apparently, even the ancient Egyptians weren't above a bit of historical revisionism. They wanted their monuments to seem older, more eternal. Can't really blame them for that. But here's what we can trust: stratigraphy. If you've never heard that word, it's about to become one of your favorite. Stratigraphy is the study of layered deposits, soil, artifacts, debris that build up over time. It's like reading the rings of a tree, except instead of counting years, you're reading human history. Every excavation around the pyramids tells the same story, the same chronological sequence. Pottery fragments, tool types, organic material that can be carbon dated, all of it consistently points to the 4th dynasty, around 2580 to 2560 BC. No gaps, no anomalies, no mystery civilizations. The evidence isn't scattered. It's not ambiguous. It forms a coherent picture. Massive, organized building project. A Bronze Age civilization at the height of its power. Thousands of workers, rotating in seasonal shifts. Stone quarried from known locations. Tools we've found and can hold in our hands. Documentation in the form of administrative papyri, describing ration distributions, work schedules, and crew assignments. It's all there. And you know what's remarkable? The detective work continues. In 2013, a team discovered the diary of Mare, an inspector who oversaw limestone transport for the pyramid. It's the oldest papyrus ever found in Egypt. And it's mundane. Beautifully, wonderfully mundane. It records boat trips, stone deliveries, ration counts, the logistics of empire. This is the opposite of mystery. This is clarity. But here's what strikes me most. The pyramid builders didn't think they were leaving evidence. Thought they were leaving a monument. The quarry marks, the tool grooves, the organizational records, those were just the practical necessities of getting the job done. They didn't know we'd need proof. They assumed their work would speak for itself. And in a way, That's exactly what it does. The pyramid doesn't need us to believe in it. It simply exists, indifferent to our theories, solid and precise and profoundly, devastatingly real. So when you hear someone say the pyramids are a mystery, know this, they're not. They're a solved problem. An answered question. A story we can read, if we're willing to look at the evidence carved into stone, painted in ochre, preserved in soil. The builders left us their documentation. We just had to learn how to read it. And that's worth more than any mystery. What's the most interesting archaeological discovery you've heard about? You know, some mysteries don't just hide in plain sight, they hide beneath the waves. There's this persistent idea floating around that somewhere under the Mediterranean, near Egypt's coast, lie the ruins of an advanced civilization that predates the pharaoh. Lost temples, impossible technology, the usual suspects. And honestly, I understand the appeal. There's something deeply romantic about sunken cities, about secrets the sea keeps. But here's where it gets interesting, because the ocean agidos hide Egyptian history. Just not the kind the theorists are hoping for. In the year 2000, archaeologist Frank Gaudio made an extraordinary discovery off the coast of Alexandria. He found Heraklion, an entire ancient Egyptian city swallowed by the Mediterranean. Massive statues of pharaohs lay on the seafloor. Stone blocks from temples. Coins, jewelry, the everyday artifacts of a bustling port city. It was spectacular. Now, this is where things get truly fascinating. Heraklion didn't sink because of some cataclysm or ancient war. It sank because the ground beneath it literally turned to liquid. Earthquakes triggered liquefaction in the Nile Delta's soft sediment. Buildings that had stood for centuries just settled into the earth, then slipped beneath the waves. Slowly, naturally, over hundreds of years. It's like finding old pier posts underwater and imagining they were part of Atlantis. Coastal structures sink over time through perfectly natural processes. The theorists point to granite blocks found underwater near the coast and say, see, evidence of lost technology. But here's what those blocks actually are: collapsed harbor structures. The ancient Egyptians documented these harbors extensively in their texts. We know what they built. We know how they built it. And we know that stone is heavy, coastlines shift, and earthquakes happen. The Mediterranean sea level has risen about 1 to 2 meters since ancient times. That doesn't sound like much, does it? But it's enough. More than enough to submerge docks, seawalls, the foundations of coastal buildings. Not enough to drown an entire advanced civilization. Just enough to reclaim the shore. And sometimes, these underwater mystery theories leap continents. You've probably heard of the Yonaguni Monument near Japan, those angular underwater formations that look eerily architectural. They get grouped with Egyptian underwater structures as evidence of some global lost civilization. But geologists have studied Yonaguni extensively. The consensus: it's a natural sandstone formation that fractured along geometric planes. Nature can be surprisingly precise when it wants to be. Here's what genuinely amazes me, though. What we're finding underwater rewrites our understanding of ancient Egypt in ways more remarkable than any alien theory. The Egyptians weren't just pyramid builders, they were sophisticated sailors and traders. Maritime archaeology has revealed trade routes stretching across the Mediterranean. Shipwrecks laden with goods from Greece, Phoenicia, even as far as the Iberian Peninsula. One shipwreck off the Turkish coast, the Uluburun wreck from around 1300 BC, contained Egyptian gold, African ebony, Baltic amber, and copper ingots. Think about that. These ancient sailors were connecting the known world through trade networks of staggering complexity. The ocean does hide history. Absolutely. But it's the history of commerce and connection. Of ships that went down in storms, their cargoes settling into the sand, waiting 4,000 years for divers with modern equipment to find them. It's the history of coastal cities built when the sea was lower, when the shoreline was different, when the world itself had a different shape. There's something humbling about underwater archaeology. When you see footage of divers carefully brushing sediment off a 3,000-year-old amphora, you realize how much we've lost just to time and tide. Not to catastrophe. Not to conspiracy. Just to the patient, relentless work of water reshaping coastlines. The theorists want pre-Egyptian super-civilizations because it makes for a better story. I get it. But what if we looked at it from a different angle? What if the real story, that coastal cities sink, that harbors collapse, that the sea slowly reclaims what we build near it, what if that's actually more profound? Because it reminds us that everything we build is temporary. Even the most massive structures. Even granite harbors that served pharaohs. The sea doesn't care about our monuments. It takes them back, grain by grain, wave by wave. And yet, here we are, 4,000 years later, still finding them. Still learning from them. The Mediterranean holds countless shipwrecks we haven't discovered yet. Coastal settlements we haven't mapped. Real history, waiting. That's the genuine mystery. Not lost super technology, but the everyday ingenuity of ancient people who built ships, navigated by stars, established trade routes, and left us scattered breadcrumbs across the seafloor. When you think about it, that's more remarkable than any fiction. These were real people, making real voyages across an ocean that terrified them, because they had goods to trade and connections to make and lives to live. The underwater mysteries aren't mysterious once you understand basic geology and archaeology. But the real discoveries? Those are endlessly fascinating. It's a humbling thought, isn't it? What ancient shipwreck or underwater discovery would you most want to explore? But while we're pondering what lies beneath the waves, there's another question that's fascinated people for just as long. Why do pyramids appear everywhere? And I mean everywhere. Egypt, obviously, but also Mesopotamia, Central America. Even China has pyramids, though they're less famous and often covered in earth and vegetation now. It's this global distribution that's fueled so many theories about lost civilizations or ancient contact between cultures. Surely, people think, these societies must have been connected somehow. How else could they all build the same structure? But here's where it gets interesting. They didn't build the same structure. Not really. Let me explain. If you're an ancient culture and you want to build something tall using stone blocks, and critically, you don't have cement or steel or any of our modern binding materials, what shape would you build? You can't just stack blocks straight up. They'd topple. You need a wide base and a narrowing top. You need the weight to distribute downward and outward. You need a pyramid. It's not mystical. It's physics. The pyramid is what engineers call a structurally stable form. It's basically the shape gravity wants you to make when you're stacking heavy things. Think about it differently for a moment. Imagine different architects in snowy climates, separated by oceans and centuries, all independently designing A-frame houses. They've never met. They've never exchanged blueprints. But snow slides off steep roofs, and a frame's handle snow loads beautifully, so of course they'd arrive at similar solutions. When you face the same problems, in this case, how to build tall with primitive materials, you often arrive at similar answers. That's what we're seeing with pyramids. Cultural convergent evolution. Now, the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan, Mexico. That's a fascinating case study. Built around 200 CE, roughly 2,000 years after the Great Pyramid of Giza. No contact between these civilizations. None. And yet, if you squint at photographs, they look related. Both are massive. Both are geometrically precise. Both clearly took enormous effort and organization to build. But the differences tell us everything. Egyptian pyramids are smooth-sided tombs. They're designed to be sealed, to house a single pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. The entrances are hidden or blocked. You're not meant to go inside. Mesoamerican pyramids, by contrast, are stepped temple platforms. They're designed for people to climb. Priests performed rituals at the top, visible to crowds below. They were theaters of religious experience, not tombs. The entire purpose is inverted. Or look at Mesopotamian ziggurats, those step towers in ancient Iraq and Iran. They look pyramidish, sure, but they're made of mud brick, not stone. They have external staircases. They were dedicated to city gods, not individual rulers. Completely different construction techniques, completely different cultural meaning. Even the Chinese pyramids, and yes, they exist, mostly in the Shaanxi province, are actually two mountains covered in earth. They're called pyramids because of their shape, but structurally they're burial mounds that happen to be pyramid-shaped because, again, that's a stable way to pile things up. So what we're really seeing isn't evidence of a single lost civilization spreading pyramid knowledge around the world. We're seeing evidence that humans, everywhere, are remarkably good at solving problems. And when the problem is build something tall and permanent with stone, the solution keeps turning out to be pyramid-shaped. This actually makes the story more beautiful, not less. Because what it shows us is that human ingenuity isn't unique to one culture, or one place, or one time. It's universal. People in Egypt looked at limestone cliffs and saw monuments waiting to be carved. People in Central America looked at volcanic stone and saw temple mountains reaching toward the sky. People in Mesopotamia looked at river clay and saw towers to honor their gods. Different materials, different purposes, different aesthetics, but the same drive to build, to create, to leave something behind. It's the same reason pottery appears independently all over the world. Or agriculture. Or writing systems. These aren't signs of contact. They're signs that when humans face similar challenges, we tend to innovate in parallel. We're all working with the same physics, the same material science, the same structural limitations. And we're all equally clever. The real wonder isn't that pyramids appear in multiple places. The real wonder is how each culture made them their own. The Egyptian pyramid reaches for eternity, smooth and perfect, aligned with stars. The Mayan pyramid climbs in steep steps toward the heavens, each level a stage in ascension. The ziggurat rises from the city like a holy mountain, bridging earth and sky. Same basic shape, completely different souls. And that's what we should celebrate. Not the false mystery of how did they all know, but the true mystery of how did each culture express something so universal in such a profoundly unique way. It's a testament to human creativity, to the fact that we're more alike than different, but also more individual than we sometimes remember. Which pyramid culture do you find most fascinating, and why?